Section 1 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 1, Number 1, January 1861. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 1, Number 1, January 1861, by Various. Bee Culture. Bee culture need no longer be a precarious and empirical pursuit. Discoveries and improvements, comparatively recent, have so elucidated its principles that its processes can be more definitely regulated than those of almost any other branch of rural economy, without being divested in the least of that attractiveness which, from the earliest periods of history, drew to it the attention alike of the humble cottager and the inquiring student, making it a subject of unflagging interest and unfailing enjoyment. It now claims additional regard from the fact that it can be so conducted as to become a source of certain and amply remunerating profit. It may be viewed, first, as a science having for its object the attainment of a correct knowledge of all that pertains to life, habits and instincts of the honeybee, and secondly, as a practical art, which regards all the attainments thus made and to be made as the only reliable foundation of successful management. The chief cause of the depressed condition of bee culture in general is not to be traced to any want of attention to the subject. It is to be found rather in an inadequate knowledge of and erroneous opinions concerning the physiology and habits of the insect, in the defective or ill-adapted construction of the hives, however differing in form and material, in which it has been doomed to live and labor, and in an injudicious mode of treatment. This, more than aught else, has prevented bee culture from making progress commensurate with the time and attention devoted to it. Despite the most assiduous observation and study, the interior of the hive and the domestic economy of the colony remain till recently, and still remain for the masses, a mystery. The common beekeeper knew that he was the owner of a stock of bees. He knew also, if he knew much, that among them was a queen, and workers, and drones. But the peculiar functions of each kind or class, and their respective relations to each other were, and still are with most persons, matters of conjecture and dispute. Of the means also of properly directing the labors of a colony, of regulating its operations systematically, so as to secure desired ends, almost utter ignorance prevailed, and still prevails very generally. After the swarm was secured, whether with or without superstitious observances, the hive was placed on its stand, and the bees were allowed to prosecute their labors as best they might. If in peculiarly favorable seasons or locations, the stock happened to thrive satisfactorily, its owner was thought to have luck, but rarely had anyone the vanity to claim success as the result of his management. And yet, duly allowing for the vicissitudes of seasons, certain and regular success does most essentially depend on management. An adequate knowledge of the nature, habits, and instincts of the insect having once been attained, and a thorough control of the operations of the colony secured by the use of properly constructed hives, the business fairly and truly becomes a subject of mere management. The means of acquiring such knowledge have now been made accessible, and hence we're warranted in stating, as we did, that bee culture need no longer be a precarious pursuit, but should be one regulated by system. The accumulated discoveries made within the last 15 years, combined with deductions from facts previously recorded, have totally revolutionized the business, placed it on a firm foundation, and given it an impetus which must cause it to advance and flourish. Having reached this stage of development, it claims a higher appreciation, and deserves a more general diffusion than before. It can be successfully prosecuted to a large extent in almost every region of the temperate zone, and under almost any circumstances. It requires only a small amount of capital, and comparatively little room, and exacts so little time that the ordinary intervals of leisure suffice. It may indeed be regarded as an agreeable relaxation from the server toils of husbandry, the drudgery of mechanical occupation, or the worrying exactions of professional duty. It may furnish fit employment for the aged and the invalid. But in order to revive the business, to render it compensating, and to cause it to advance with steady pace, the establishment of a periodical paper devoted to its interests is highly important. In a country so extensive as this, where general apiarian conventions have not yet become customary, and beekeepers can seldom have personal intercourse with each other, a medium of communication, affording facilities for discussion and frequent interchange of opinions, is evidently needed. Such a medium, for those engaged in congenial pursuits, the American Bee Journal is intended to be, and such, with the aid and support of those for whose benefit it is specially intended, it may speedily become. It will serve likewise as a repository of whatever is directly or collaterally of practical value in this department of rural economy, and as a vehicle by which information can be readily, rapidly, and widely diffused, so that the early introduction of useful improvements may be secured. Such a periodical will tend also to increase the number of apiarians, and thus make bee culture a business of more general importance, demonstrating finally that a vast and seemingly inexhaustible source of national wealth has hitherto been greatly neglected. It is not proposed to give the Bee Journal a predominantly scientific cast. Aware that to be extensively useful, it must adapt itself to the wants of the community, it will constantly regard that object. Its contents must be diversified. Its columns must be accessible alike to the apiarian, whose experiences and observations enable him to communicate information, and to the inquirer, whose primary desire is to obtain instruction. But while aiming to render bee culture more popular and foster its extension, the Bee Journal will endeavor to attract to it the attention of professed students of natural science, and such may be assured that it is a subject worthy of their powers. That which engaged the faculties of a Columella, an Aristotle, and a Celsus among the ancients, and of a Swammerdam, a Riemenyer, and a Huber among the moderns, cannot certainly be devoid of attraction for an inquiring mind. It possesses fascination enough to engender even enthusiasm in its votaries, and much as has latterly been accomplished in the elucidation of obscure points, there remain mysteries enough to be explored and explained, to employ the most astute intellect. It is surprising indeed that the physiology and natural history of the honeybee have been made the subject of original investigation in so limited a degree by American naturalists. What has been done in that direction in this country was done almost exclusively by men who commenced simply as apiarians, and nearly all that is to be found in treatises purely scientific is a mere rehash from foreign publications substantially antiquated. This fact is not credible to American genius, and now that a Lockhart, a von Siebold, and a Dönhoff in Germany have set the example of renewed personal investigation, it is to be hoped that this inviting field will no longer be left unexplored by congenial minds here. From the days of Aristotle to those of Swammerdam, a period of nearly 2,000 years, little progress was made. The advance from the time of the latter to that of Huber was small, and thenceforward to the time of Gundulach not much was added. With the enunciation, however, of de Dziersen's theory, a new era commenced, and though that theory encountered warm opposition and excited a protracted controversy, it has triumphantly sustained itself and led to further important discoveries. Hence the day cannot be distant when bee culture may, so far as the theory is involved, be regarded as having assumed an impregnable position. In the earlier part of its career, the German Bienenzeitung had to contend with difficulties such as will not have to be encountered here. Bee culture had long been a subject of general interest and study in Germany. Various theories had been framed to explain the mysteries which its advocates recognized as existing, and the authors and adherents of these several theories clung fondly to their preconceived notions, defending them oft with intemperate ardor. So long as it seemed conceded that any one of these theories might be true, and all of them were treated with equal difference, the Bienenzeitung moved along smoothly. But when de Dziersen advanced his new theory, though modestly submitting it at first in the form of a hypothesis, a different state of affairs ensued. The old schools felt intuitively that if this new doctrine be true, It involved the subversion and repudiation of all the subsisting theories. It was at once made an object of attack from all quarters, and a violent controversy, not unmixed with acrimonious personalities, followed. Dzierzin defended his theory with great dialectic skill, from which his training and large experience in bee culture eminently qualified him. Then, turning on his assailants, he exposed their fallacies and the inconsistency of their views, and arrayed against them in the evidence of incontrovertible facts. Some of the old correspondents of the Bienzingtung began to complain and remonstrate, and finally many of them withdrew, but the truth was rapidly making converts on every hand, and when Berlepsch, who had vauntingly denounced the new theory, proclaimed his conversion, and Klein, Ortel, and other distinguished apiarians became its advocates, a new and highly intelligent corps of contributors soon made amends for the defection. The impartial course of the Bienzingtung, pending the controversy, was acknowledged, its policy vindicated, and, in its specialty, it now enjoys universal esteem. Difficulties like these, the American Bee Journal need scarcely apprehend. There are no cliques or parties here, advocating theories or systems which they cherish with the prejudice of paternal affection. Hence, though there may be differences of opinion, frank investigation will be accepted to all, and intemperate zeal will hardly obtrude itself, with its unreasoning obstinacy. In conducting this journal, our aim will be to promote bee culture as a systematic practical pursuit, based on established principles and ascertained facts. In furtherance of this object, while we invite and will give scope to full and free, yet temperate and courteous discussion, we shall unreservedly, as occasion may require, express our own views and convictions, striving to place before the reader the information requisite for intelligent judgment on any topic that may claim attention or deserve notice. We conceive that we have the means to render the Bee Journal both interesting and instructive, and our endeavor will be to make it not only a welcome visitor, but a valuable and reliable counselor. It must, however, not be supposed that the paper is designed for those who only propose engaging in bee culture on an extensive scale, and the adopting of methods and processes so highly appreciated abroad. It contemplates more general usefulness, and will address itself with equal earnestness to that much more numerous class whose operations are necessarily restricted within narrower limits. The most certain means of securing progress are to be found in that which will enable common beekeepers who still use only the simple straw to prosecute the business with due success and satisfaction, thus inducing them finally to join the march of improvement. Hence all, and such especially, are invited to communicate with us freely, stating any difficulties they may have to encounter, or any vexations they may experience in this pursuit, giving us an account of their own peculiar methods and manipulations, or relating whatever of new or strange in this department comes under their notice, their joys and sorrows as apiarians, their successes as well as mishaps. Our desire is, of course, that beekeepers, generally, would become readers and correspondents of the journal, and that each should regard it for himself as a medium of imparting as well as receiving information. We ask them to send us their queries, their suggestions, their remarks, and their criticisms, as well as the results of their reflections and experiments. Let them here record their observations and relate their experience, and much that is valuable cannot fail to be elicited for the general benefit. Let them derive a heat from their favorite insect, which by concord and cooperative industry ensures the prosperity of the colony. End of section 1. Read by Curtis Bilson, Victoria, BC, September 2023.